All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today we're taking a deep dive into a book that's been sending chills down spines for decades. George Orwell's 1984.
And with the world feeling a little shaky these days, well, it's amazing how relevant this book still is.
Yeah, it's like Orwell had a time machine or something. It's not just a story, it's a warning. A look at how power can twist and turn, and how easily the truth can be, well, manipulated.
Absolutely. And it's not just fiction. Orwell was drawing from real-world totalitarian regimes of his time. It's scary how many parallels we see in today's world with rising nationalism and information control.
Let's face it, it's impossible to ignore.
Mm,
Okay, so for those who haven't cracked open 1984 lately, it's about this totalitarian state called Oceania, ruled by Big Brother. You've got the thought police, thought crime, newspeak, and the ever-present telescreens. It's a world where thinking the wrong thing can get you vaporized.
And don't forget about doublethink. That's where it gets really creepy, holding two contradictory beliefs at the same time. It's like your brain is doing mental gymnastics.
It's mind-bending, to say the least. But it's fascinating how this concept of double-think actually connects to some pretty old philosophical ideas.
Right. Think about Plato's nodal lie. That's where a fictional narrative is used to, shall we say, maintain order.
So you're saying that even back in ancient Greece, they understood the power of a good story, even if it's, well, not exactly true.
Exactly. And this idea of shaping reality through narratives, well, it pops up again with the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu and his concept of habitus.
Now, habitus might sound a bit academic, but trust me, this is worth paying attention to. It's happening all around us, even right now.
It's like a set of unspoken rules, beliefs, and behaviors that shape how we see the world. Think about it. Every society has its own ideas about beauty, value, right and wrong. It's this habitus that guides us, often without us even realizing it.
Okay, I see how this ties back to 1984. Oceania's citizens are living in a completely manufactured habitus, right? Everything they think and do is dictated by the party.
Exactly. And it's maintained through a constant stream of propaganda. Those creepy telescreens are everywhere. The thought police are always lurking. It's a system designed to crush any independent thought.
It's really chilling when you think about it. And Orwell really drives this home with the main character, Winston Smith. His job at the Ministry of Truth, literally rewriting history to fit the party's narrative.
A brilliant, albeit terrifying, way to show how those in power can manipulate the past to control the present and the future. And we're seeing echoes of this today. Think about the rise of misinformation and deepfakes. It's a battle over the narrative.
It's kind of scary how relevant that is right now.
Yeah.
And let's not forget those ever-present telescreens. In 1984, it's like a 247 assault on the senses designed to crush any independent thought.
It really makes you wonder how much that Orwellian control are we seeing today? Are we sleepwalking into a similar reality?
It's a question we have to ask ourselves, especially these days with, recent events. Well, it's like a page straight out of 1984.
You've got a point there. The rise of populism and nationalism globally, it often comes with a rejection of facts and experts and a manipulation of information.
It's like that famous line from 1984. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past.
And the battle over who controls the narrative, it's more intense than ever before, especially with information and misinformation spreading online like wildfire.
It's everywhere. Social media, news outlets, even within our own minds. Trying to figure out what's real and what's fake is exhausting.
It is. And that exhaustion, that feeling of being overwhelmed, it can lead to apathy. People just give up and accept whatever they're told.
Which is, of course, exactly what those in power want, right?
Yeah.
A population that's too tired to think critically.
You hit the nail on the head. And it all ties back to that concept of habitus. If we're not aware of the forces shaping our beliefs, we become easy to manipulate.
So how do we break free? How do we resist these powerful narratives, especially when they're often disguised as something good, something patriotic even?
That's the million-dollar question. It's something we'll dig into as we continue our deep dive. But for now, I'd say awareness is key. Recognizing how our thoughts and perceptions are being influenced, that's the first step.
It's about becoming more conscious. What information are we consuming? What narratives are we accepting? What systems are at play around us? It's about being an active participant, not just passively accepting someone else's version of the truth.
Absolutely. That's where the real power lies, in our ability to think for ourselves, questioning assumptions, choosing our own path.
It's about reclaiming our agency in a world that's constantly telling us who we are and what to think.
And that's a fight worth having, for ourselves and for the future.
Okay, so we're back, and I gotta say, diving into 1984 can be a bit, well, intense. It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
All that control, the manipulation. Poor Winston and Julia. It's bleak.
Yeah, no sugarcoating it. 1984 is a tough read. But, I think its real power isn't in predicting the future. It's in making us confront some hard truths about power and freedom and how fragile they can be.
It's like a wake-up call,
All right.
making us look at our own world and ask ourselves, are we headed down the same path? And if so, how do we even begin to resist?
Big questions for sure. And while 1984 doesn't exactly offer a happy ending, it's not completely hopeless either. There are these glimmers of resistance, moments of defiance that show us how we might navigate our own increasingly complex world.
So where do we find those glimmers? What can we learn from those who stood up, even when the odds were stacked against them?
Well, think about Winston and Julia. Even though the rebellion was short-lived, it showed a deep longing for connection, for something real, something that transcended the party's control.
Yeah, it's like they created this little bubble of freedom in the middle of a suffocating system. Their love affair, it was a testament to the human spirit, that need for beauty and meaning, even in the darkest of times.
Exactly. And that's a powerful lesson for us today. When we focus on genuine connections, on experiences that nourish our souls, we're pushing back against those forces that try to dehumanize and control us.
It's about reclaiming those parts of ourselves that are hardest to manipulate: love, compassion, creativity, that search for truth and beauty.
You got it. When we engage in things that foster our creativity, that let us express ourselves authentically, we're tapping into a power that can't be easily controlled.
Like art, music, writing, even just spending time in nature. These things remind us of who we are beyond the roles and labels that society tries to put on us.
And it's not just individual acts of resistance, it's about building communities that share our values, that support our growth, that encourage open dialogue and critical thinking.
Because in 1984, isolation was a weapon, right? The party wanted people to distrust each other, to be totally reliant on the state.
Absolutely. But when we build strong communities, online or offline, we create a support network that can help us resist those isolating forces. We can share information, challenge each other's perspectives, and find strength in collective action.
It's realizing we're not alone. There are others who share our concerns, our hopes, and together we can work towards a better world.
And that brings us to another vital aspect of resistance critical thinking. We need to be discerning about the information we consume, question the narratives we're given, and seek out diverse viewpoints.
Because in this age of information overload, it's easy to drown in a sea of opinions and propaganda. We need to develop those skills to filter through the noise and reach our own conclusions.
Exactly. And that means being willing to challenge our own biases, to consider perspectives that differ from our own, even to admit when we might be wrong.
It's about embracing humility, being curious, and understanding that learning is a lifelong process. There's always something new to discover.
And that mindset, that willingness to question and explore, is crucial for resisting the kind of thought control Orwell described in 1984.
Blind obedience, that's what totalitarian regimes want. They want to shut down critical thinking to create a population that blindly follows orders.
And that's where things like our education system, the media, even our social circles can play a role. If we're not taught how to think critically, to analyze information, to spot propaganda, then we're basically being set up for conformity.
Wow. It's like we're being given the tools to build our own mental prisons. That's a scary thought.
It is. But it also highlights the importance of seeking out alternative sources of information, talking to people with different views, and constantly challenging our own assumptions.
Cultivating a healthy skepticism, not just of authority figures, but of our own deeply held beliefs. Sometimes the most dangerous narratives are the ones we tell ourselves.
Which brings us to self-awareness. Understanding our own motivations, our biases, our weaknesses, it's essential for recognizing when we're being manipulated.
Because the most effective forms of control, they often work on us subconsciously, playing on our fears and desires without us even noticing.
Exactly. So taking the time to reflect, to understand why we believe what we believe, to identify the patterns that shape our choices, that's a powerful form of resistance in itself.
It's about taking back control, becoming conscious creators of our own reality, not just passively accepting someone else's version of the truth.
And that's a journey that takes courage, commitment, and a willingness to constantly challenge ourselves and the world around us.
It's about embracing the messy, uncomfortable process of growth and transformation. True freedom isn't about blind obedience. It's about constantly seeking knowledge, understanding, and authentic self-expression.
And on that note, I think it's a good time for a break.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into 1984. We've covered a lot of ground, from the horrors of Oceania to the power of habitus and the fight for freedom in a world that's, well, sometimes feels a little too Orwellian.
Yeah, it's been a pretty intense journey so far, but now comes the big question.
Yeah.
How do we actually put all this into practice? How do we resist?
Right. It's easy to get overwhelmed. I mean, there's so much going on. Political polarization, information overload. It's like our privacy is vanishing. So let's talk about what we can do. What are some concrete steps, some real-world strategies to push back against these forces?
Well, I think it starts with being mindful of technology. Think about those telescreens in 1984. Constant surveillance, nonstop propaganda. We may not have telescreens in our living rooms, but, well, let's face it, our phones, our computers, they're kind of like our own personal telescreens.
Yeah, we're carrying them around in our pockets. So how do we use technology without giving up our privacy and, our freedom to think for ourselves?
It's about making conscious choices.
Yeah.
Do we really need to be online all the time? Are we okay with trading our privacy for convenience?
To be more intentional,
Right.
setting boundaries, maybe even like reading an actual book once in a while.
Exactly. And it's not just about limiting screen time, it's about diversifying our information sources. Don't just rely on algorithms and social media to tell you what to think. Read books, seek out independent media, talk to people with different viewpoints.
Cultivating that healthy skepticism, right? Questioning everything, even things that seem to confirm what we already believe. Truth is rarely black and white.
And that leads to another important point: getting involved in our communities. In 1984, the party kept people isolated, made them easier to control. But when we come together, when we build strong communities, we create this amazing counterforce to that isolation.
So it's not just about retreating into our own little bubbles of resistance. It's about engaging with the world, connecting with people, working together to make a difference.
Exactly. Find ways to contribute, whether it's volunteering, supporting local businesses, even just having a real conversation with your neighbor.
It's about remembering that we're all connected. Our actions, even the small ones, they ripple out and affect others.
And let's not forget about our own inner lives. In 1984, the party tried to control everything, even people's thoughts and feelings. They wanted to create these obedient robots, devoid of any individuality or creativity.
So how do we protect that inner freedom, that ability to think critically and independently in a world that's, well, often designed to distract and manipulate us?
It's about nourishing our minds and spirits. Meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature, engaging in creative activities. These are all ways to reconnect with ourselves, to find that inner peace and clarity.
Creating space for reflection, right? Asking the big questions about life, about meaning and purpose. Remembering that we're more than just consumers, more than just data points.
And this leads to a really crucial point. Never give up hope. 1984 may be a dark story, but it's a warning, not a prediction. We have the power to choose a different path, to create a future where freedom and individuality thrive.
It's about remembering the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the darkest times, there are always glimmers of hope, acts of courage, people who refuse to give up on a better world.
And those people, those beacons of resistance, they're the ones who will shape the future. It's up to each of us to decide whether we'll let the forces of control win or whether we'll fight for something better.
So 1984 is a warning, but it's also a call to action. The future isn't set in stone. We create it through our choices, our actions. We all have a role to play in shaping the world we want to live in. Even the smallest acts of resistance can make a difference.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with this. Never underestimate the power of your own voice, your own actions, your own belief in a better future. Keep questioning, keep challenging, keep creating, and never lose hope.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into 1984. We hope it's given you some food for thought, some inspiration, maybe even some tools to navigate these complex times. Remember, the future is in our hands.